Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the challenge is to opening up the public schools, getting the economy moving again, but first, loosening COVID-19 restrictions. As they say, let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome, Marc Levy with the Associated Press. You join me by way of Zoom, as you have in the past. Well, let's talk about a big subject, and that is these huge differences between Democrats and Republicans in the legislature on how quickly the economy can get started. And this past week in the legislature, we had big differences once again with several vetoes by the governor. Give us an update on where that all stands.
Yeah, so the governor vetoed a raft of legislation this week. The Republican-controlled legislature passed these bills knowing that they would be vetoed. The governor said it last week, but these are bills that essentially would force him to let things like real estate agents, dog groomers, manufacturers, garden centers, a whole raft of different types of businesses operate within certain, as long as they're adhering to federal and state guidelines for social distancing. The governor vetoed them all, saying that they're an unwarranted intrusion into the executive powers that he has. But he's also responded, as we've seen in recent weeks, to pressure from the legislature by letting construction restart, providing guidelines to the real estate industry to restart within, as long as they're doing social distancing and limiting certain activity, in-person activity. Underneath it all is essentially a wider battle to blame somebody for the economic fallout, whether it's President Trump or whether it's governors. But in the legislature alone, there are Democrats who are starting to move along with Republicans in putting pressure on the governor. So Tom Wolf has tried to move to relieve that pressure.
It seems that the governor is relenting a bit in terms of opening up the economy. It looks like it may be a little faster than if he had his own way, and he doesn't because there's huge pressure. But there's also some very big partisan differences between Democrats and Republicans, with Republicans representing districts where they want to move the economy along faster, and Democrats seemingly from districts where the voters say it's about health. And that seems to be playing out big time in state government.
That's right. The southeastern part of the state is the hardest hit, and that's where a lot of the Democrats are coming from. They're also standing up for Wolf's powers, to his ability to dictate how quickly the state reopens, and if there is another resurgence of the virus, how the state deals with that.
Yeah. Before I let you go, testing in nursing homes. It looks like now testing will be required, and it will be done frequently, given the fact that 60, 65, even somewhat higher percentages of the deaths that have occurred in the state because of COVID-19 have been in nursing homes and long-term care facilities.
That's right. The governor just said that he plans to have every employee and every resident of nursing homes, assisted living centers, and personal care homes tested weekly, hopefully by June 1st. That's about a week later than the federal government has recommended to states. It's a massive undertaking. His Department of Health hasn't released a plan that backs that up, but we're talking easily more than 150,000, maybe close to 200,000 people who would have to be tested every week. So it is a massive undertaking. It's not clear that the testing capacity is even close to being there for that. So we'll see.
Yeah, in some places it's been reported that they have the testing sites open and their people aren't showing up for it. That's been in the news lately, which is kind of fascinating. You'd think that more people would be clamoring for the testing.
Yeah, testing sites tend to focus on people who have symptoms, but there are a lot of drugstores, CVS's, Rite Aid's, now testing people.
Right.
At some point, the state is going to begin expanding testing of people who don't have symptoms.
Right. Well, Marc, I want to thank you for coming on. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about the challenges to open up the public schools, 500 school districts and more. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, the challenges to opening up the public schools. Joining me is Rich Askey. He's the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association. They represent the teachers and other school personnel. Well, Rich, your folks are going to be at the center of opening up the schools this fall, and there are tremendous challenges to reopening them. Is it going to happen, or can the challenges be met? Take it.
Well, I will tell you first off that I've been hearing from my members across the state, and they are so anxious to return to their classrooms. They miss their kids. Their kids miss going to school. You know, school provides a lot of stability for our students. So yes, there's going to be a lot of challenges. And for schools to open, we're going to have to think about things like social distancing and sanitizing areas and transporting children. You know, how do you put so many kids on a bus? Things like that. So there's a lot of challenges ahead, but we're working on them now, and we're working with other state association groups like the School Boards Association, the Administrators Association, principals groups. We're all working strong together because everybody wants to see our kids back.
Well, part of the challenge that we can talk about has to do with the budget shortfall. It looks like something like $1 billion in lost revenue. We'll have to see what the state legislature does in next year's budget. But discuss the challenges. These funding challenges have to be enormous.
Oh, gosh, yes. I mean, with the economic downturn, it's going to have a chilling effect if we don't do something on the reopening of schools. You know, last time with 40 billion, when we lost $1 billion, we lost approximately 40,000 jobs in education. Now, how are you going to keep the schools clean, feed the kids, make sure they're social distancing, transport them with that many jobs lost? So yes, it's time for Congress to step up and take care of this problem, because otherwise we're not going to have safe schools for our kids in the fall, and that's unconscionable.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, many state legislatures and governors in states are looking to Congress to help, provide money for state governments, for county governments, and also for schools and hospitals. And I think that's your point.
Yes, and it should be. This is not this is a problem that we all need to come together on, because there's going to be a lot of healing that has to be done after this pandemic. Our kids are going to be behind a little bit academically. Some of them are going to come back with social and emotional problems from this. Yeah. So we need all the supports we possibly can. And I can't help but think that our senators would be bipartisan to make sure that our kids and our communities have what they need.
That's a great point. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about what school leaders are thinking about as they prepare to open up the schools, which is, as I keep saying, it's a challenge, it's a challenge, it's a challenge. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back to the program. I'm chatting with Rich Askey. He's the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association. They're going to, obviously, the teachers and other school personnel heavily involved in opening up the schools. So, Rich, let's talk about, I'll put it bluntly, what's in the heads of school administrators and other personnel, teachers, when they begin to open up the schools and the issues that are related to that?
Well, the first thing that's in everybody's head is making sure that our students and the community feels safe and secure coming back to the buildings, that they know when they send their children into the school, we're doing everything possible to make sure their children remain healthy. So we're looking at things like the school schedule. We're going to have to stagger the school schedules possibly to reduce class sizes. We're going to have to do some other policies regarding PPE and masks. And that's one reason we're going to need school nurses to make sure that all of that happens. Air quality. Air quality is going to be so important. We're going to have to measure the air quality, and we're going to have to look at the filtration of the air in our buildings. Some of our buildings have older HVAC systems. So that has to be looked at. Well, meals, the preparation and serving. How do you serve a meal to 700 students at lunchtime? How do you do that?
I'll tell you, I'm going to interrupt. Let me interrupt.
Go ahead.
This challenge, when you start to mentioning these, seems just absolutely overwhelming, because you have many of the school districts, A, are going to have debts. B, it's getting the personnel together to begin to implement these changes. And it seems like it's years away by the time we get to the start of school this fall. But go. Right? It's
going to be here before you know it. I mean, then we all believe that it's going to be June. And we all know summer, I think, is the fastest season on the planet. So it's going to be here before we know it. And that's why everybody's digging in. And that's also, I want to return to the fact why the Congress has to step up and make sure that we have the resources needed to make all of these things happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the challenge, when I look through these challenges, and we have them everywhere, I'm in a studio where we're at JPL, where we're keeping the social distance. I mean, imagine doing that in second and third and fourth grades with, kids and their need to be together. And that has to be, just that alone seems to be, to me, an enormous challenge.
Well, Terry, look at kindergarten. What is kindergarten all about? It's about learning social skills. It's about interacting with each other. So that's going to affect how a kindergarten class is run. How do we have a kindergarten class of 30 kids that's based on social interaction? All right, so we're really going to have to redo things.
Before I let you go, I have to talk about remote learning, which is the way the school year ended, and it's same as going on in colleges and universities. I mean, that has to also pose extraordinary challenges.
It did, but I think everybody has stepped up. I mean, we see kids getting Chromebooks. We see public television stations helping out. We have parents who are on board. There's been a lot of struggle, but teachers are teaching, students are learning. That's the good news. And we'll see what effect it has on education in the future, too.
Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on, and you're going to come back and keep us posted. Boy, are we going to cover this whole business of opening up the schools. All right, joining me, let's talk about getting the economy moving, that continued debate, health care on the one hand versus getting the economy moving. Maybe they don't have to be on different planes, so to speak. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society, inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine, and by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, welcome David Taylor. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Well, David, let me just start with the national numbers. 16% unemployment. Some think we are heading to 25% unemployment, which would match the highest percentage unemployment during the Great Depression. In addition to that, we also have a number of very, very serious problems with the national economy. Some economists think we are actually not in a recession, but in a depression now. What's the situation in the state of Pennsylvania in terms of unemployment, jobs, and the future?
Well, Terry, the situation in Pennsylvania is worse. That 1,800,000 Pennsylvanians had applied for unemployment compensation, which would put Pennsylvania's unemployment rate at 33%. This is catastrophic. Pennsylvania, which is the fifth most populous state, has the second largest number of people who are unemployed. That the wolf lockdown in Pennsylvania has been broader and has lasted longer than in other states. And so this is why it's critically important that we begin safely reopening, and not to begin, but we need to accelerate safely reopening the entire Commonwealth.
Well, when you look around the country, I mean, some states, as you know, have moved quicker and faster. Pennsylvania is a bit, is complicated. We have small towns and rural areas that seemingly can reopen earlier than urban areas, which there's some reluctance to do, as you know. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't find a way to safely open up the economy, the economic downturn that we're in is only going to get worse, and that's going to hurt people considerably.
Yes, thank you, Terry. That's exactly right. And, we need to adopt an agenda of total harm minimization, that the choice was never between a safe reopening and continued lockdown. It's a choice between a safe reopening and an unsafe, chaotic, wild reopening, which is what is going to happen when you push people too far. And unfortunately, that's where we've gotten to now.
Yeah, when you think about it, however, there's certain differences. And you're the man. You understand manufacturing as much as anybody in the Commonwealth, and there are lots of manufacturing industries that Governor Wolf's administration said, no way, no how, you're not going to reopen. And then, over time, many of them have opened. But what about restaurants and bars? And I know people want to get back to a normal life, and we have many of these restaurants and bars and other small businesses that aren't going to survive. They're just not going to make it.
Yeah, and Terry, this is the point. The governor's rule of life-sustaining versus non-life-sustaining is only one way to look at it. And another way to address the problem is what can operate safely versus what can't. And so anyone that can operate safely with no contact, CDC compliant practices, we need them to be open, because we need these businesses to survive. That if we have a continued lockdown, we're already well past the point, Terry. Even a really healthy business is only going to have maybe 2 months max of cash on hand to operate. We are well past that point. Most businesses only have, 3-4 weeks of cash. And so by maintaining the lockdown, it means that you're going to break more of these entities. They're going to go under. They're not going to come back later on, and that's going to be catastrophic for the tax base. Yeah. For any business that can operate safely now, we need to let them operate so that they can earn some kind of revenue stream by satisfying customers, so that we don't have so that we're limiting the amount of economic damage being caused by not just the pandemic, but more by the pandemic response.
Yeah, specifically, let's talk about manufacturing. It's critical. It's an important area of the Pennsylvania economy, as, again, you know better than anyone. What's the status of manufacturing? It looks like when you talk about retail versus manufacturing, that manufacturing might be in a little better position. But again, talk about that.
The difference, Terry, would be between point of purchase, customer contact type businesses versus your larger structured plant floor type businesses that, with manufacturing. Manufacturing is the engine that drives Pennsylvania's economy. Manufacturing is the sector that adds the most value. Manufacturing is the sector that has the strongest multiplier effect on job creation. If you lose that core manufacturing activity in the plant floor, all the other jobs with logistics and supply chains and vendors, all those things go away. Because Governor Wolf has not followed the federal standard under the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and it instead has imposed his own list, and then you get to the waiver process, all which is very ad hoc. not transparent, that we have had large chunks of the manufacturing economy shut down. And moreover, we've had real problems with the supply chain that, it's a knowledge problem. Nobody is smart enough to know all the different inputs that go into everybody's manufacturing process. And so that's why we needed blanket waivers, and why we wanted at the outset for manufacturing to be deemed essential. We said that on March 19, hours after the governor's shutdown order. The next day, March 20, that the governor received a letter from Jay Timmons, the president of the National Association of Manufacturers, saying the same thing. And Terry, what I'm concerned about is Pennsylvania's relative competitive position. I have peer relationships with the other state association leaders around the country. And so to hear from them, like, for example, that in Georgia, manufacturing never closed. And so, insofar as a Pennsylvania business, a Pennsylvania manufacturer is part of a multi-state business or some kind of a national supply chain or a national process, if the manufacturer in Pennsylvania is not able to fulfill a contract, is not able to provide the function for which they would otherwise be paid, that multi-state company or that national network is going to go and find a different manufacturer that can manufacture in North Carolina or Georgia or Texas or someplace else that's open. And what that means, Terry, is that Pennsylvania will lose that business permanently. And it's because of this dynamic, which is already underway, has been underway for weeks and months. We need to accelerate the smart, safe restart of our manufacturing economy, because, again, otherwise we're going to lose this business permanently.
Right. Well, it looks like the governor is loosening and weakening on the hard position that he took, even though he did veto some bills last week in the legislature. But more and more of the economy, I guess. It's a question, the speed with which it's occurring, is that the essential element here, or the nature of the various businesses?
It's both. We need the Pennsylvania to follow the federal guidelines, which are being applied in 47 other states, and we need to accelerate the restart so that we can, again, we're going to need economic strength to pull Pennsylvania out of the ditch. Manufacturing is the sector that adds the most value. That's why we need manufacturing back online as broadly as possible for those businesses that can be CDC compliant and do all the different things to protect their employees and customers, because the long-term economic damage from this is going to be catastrophic.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been an important update, and you're going to come back and keep us surprised as we move ahead in the future. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay safe and stay well.